This is Gayle from BERNINA of Naperville, and I am going to show you today how I made this super cute Winnie the Pooh twist and turn quilt. Now the pattern is an original BERNINA of Naperville pattern, and the instructions, the designs, and the fabric are all available at BERNINA.com if you would like to make this quilt just like me. But I'm going to take you through the steps to make it. It's a super easy pattern. 9 blocks make up about a 60-inch quilt with some borders. Perfect for a little baby quilt or play mat. So let's have a look and see how to make it. All right, to roll up our sleeves and get into this, our little embroidered baby quilt or play mat featuring our topsy-turvy quilt pattern and the Winnie the Pooh collection. You're going to get a free instructions if you click on the link in the description of this video. And that's what we're looking at right now. And that's going to describe the project for you. There's also going to be a link that goes back to this video that you're watching now. And this is really an adorable quilt that's perfect for making a baby quilt or a play mat. I think you're going to love sewing these half rectangle pieces. That might be a new technique for some of you. And I think this is for a confident beginner. We're going to stitch and trim up our final block. So it's perfect for the non-perfectionist. And if you're a perfectionist, well, you know what? You're going to relax a little bit when you make this project. So for our supplies, we're making a 9-block quilt. So if you don't want to do the Winnie the Pooh designs, you could certainly pick any design collection that you choose. But you're going to want to pick your 9 favorite ones to go into this quilt. The Winnie the Pooh collection is from OESD, and they're oesd.com. You can order directly from our website on OESD by clicking their icon at the bottom of our website, or you can order designs from them through us in store using Designs on Demand. And then finally, if you buy our kit from us to get the Winnie the Pooh designs, the fabrics I used, and everything, you're going to get an automatic email that comes to you with this presentation deck equipped with the designs after you purchase the kit. So let's talk a little bit about proper stabilization and how you're going to prep your background fabric for your embroidery. So let's have a look at the stabilizer. So first I used a fusible woven on the back of this background fabric, and that is this fusible woven from OESD. You could also use Shape Flex, which is SF101 by Pellon. Then I used a heavyweight tearaway. This is medium weight. You can use 2 layers of medium weight or 1 layer of heavyweight. It is also appropriate if you wanted to use a heavyweight cutaway. But if you do the heavyweight cutaway, you're going to have to trim with scissors around here rather than tearing. So I wanted to show you something. You know, sometimes we just try to crank things out and it doesn't always turn out in our favor. But when I was using my embroidery machine, I was using a super large hoop and I had already trimmed my blocks. And what ended up happening is I had to float this design onto a larger hoop. And I just wasn't thinking, and I didn't do any basting box or anything like that. And what happened is, if you look at Pooh, the little lining doesn't line up with his arm or with his face. The birds are just kind of wonky, and that is simply because it just started puckering up on me. And that's kind of a common thing that's going to happen, especially with designs like this that are dense. So what I recommend instead is, even though our finished block size here, we're going to cut it to 10.5 inches before it gets sewn into the quilt block, I recommend that you cut the pieces of fabric that you need so that all of the fabric will fit in your embroidery hoop when you hoop it, so that you don't have to worry about the top layer sliding around on you or having to use additional basting stitches or anything like that, because you can see when I did it the right way, all of the outlining lines up very nicely. Now, when I stitched my designs, I used isocord thread in the top and OESD bobbin fill in the bobbin. And I just followed the thread colors that OESD recommended per design. Yes, there were some substitutions because I didn't want to go digging for everything. So the world does not explode if you don't use the exact colors. But sometimes when you're going for shading, particularly, on Winnie, when he's got the honey color and then the brown color and then whatever, you want to make sure that it blends together. So it's always good to go by the suggestions that OESD or the designers of the embroidery designs pick for you. I did some of these designs on my Bernina E16, and I did some of the designs on my 790 Pro. So, it doesn't really matter what machine you have as far as embroidery goes. You just need to create 9 different blocks. So let's have a look at what I embroidered for this project. Now, I've done this project many different ways. Originally, this pattern started off with this whimsical little giraffes and things like that, and it was super cute, and we did it in animal prints. Then when the Tulip Paint collection, Curiouser and Curiouser, came out, we thought because it's twisted looking, it would be really cute with the Alice in Wonderland theme. So now we're going to do 9 of the blocks into a Winnie the Pooh themed quilt. And I've got some really cute fabrics that I'll show you in a minute, but I wanted to take a moment to just tell you that this doesn't have to be Winnie the Pooh. This could be any embroidery designs. And because the blocks are designed to be 10 inches finished, you can do rather large embroideries with these. So here are the selections that I'm putting into the quilt. Now, I didn't use everything from this collection, and if you're curious where this came from, this is the Winnie the Pooh collection from Embroidery Online. That's our friends at OESD. If you download the handout that's in the description of this video, you will be able to click a link right to purchase these designs, as well as the cutting instructions and everything that you need to make this quilt. Okay, so now I've decided that I'm going with this, honeycomb kind of look. So I picked this fabric, and this fabric to be kind of that wonky frame. Then the diamonds are going to be out of this fabric, and the border and the backing is going to be these beehives. I'm sure you've heard of a half square triangle before, but this is a half rectangle triangle. And because we're kind of doing this little wonky design, and there's so many ways to approach this, please don't think that this is the only way. This is just the way I designed it for this pattern. We are going to need to cut a strip that's a rectangle and then cut it in half on the diagonal. I always make a template, and then I measure the template to make sure that I'm having you cut it the right way. Now, before we get started playing with cutting and using what we just learned about half square rectangles, we want to plan where our embroidery designs are going to go, and we want to plan where our different fabrics are going to go, because we have 3 different fabrics that are going to frame our embroidered blocks, and we kind of want to know which ones are going to lean to the left and which ones are going to lean to the right. So if we look at this diagram there, the number 1 labeled blocks are our left leaning blocks, and the number 2 blocks are the right leaning blocks. So therefore, you're going to need 5 that lean to the left and 4 that lean to the right. So what you're going to do is you're going to cut 4 3 5/8 of an inch strips, subcut those into 16 5 5/8 by 3 5/8 of an inch rectangles, and this will make 4 rectangles of light colors for each set. So save your extra fabric in case you change your mind or you lean something the wrong direction. Then from that peach bee fabric, you're going to cut 4 15 5/8 of an inch strips. Then you're going to subcut those into 40 3 5/8 by 15 5/8 rectangles. We're going to reserve some additional bits for an accident, like I mentioned earlier. And then another thing that I told you, perfectionists beware, is your half rectangle pieces may not align with your trimmed embroidered blocks. So this is more of, if our middle blocks, if we trimmed these to be about 11.5 inches, they're going to line up perfectly. Otherwise, anything smaller than 11.5 inch finished embroidered trimmed block, you're going to need to trim some little bits off. But I actually like it better with the little bits cut off. And you'll see as we go through the demo why I think it looks better. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to be cutting these half rectangles. So the first thing that is really important is I want you to cut per block. This will really help you compartmentalize just making one block at a time. So you're going to start with stacking 2 of the same coordinating fabric right side up with 2 of the accent fabric right side up. So you can see in my diagram there to the right that all of the yellow is going around and framing where the embroidery is going to go. And then that peachy color is on the outside. And this is a right-leaning block. So for a right-leaning block, after you have your pieces stacked all right side up, you're going to cut your rectangles for the right-leaning diagonal cut, starting with the upper left corner and going down to the lower right corner. Then that is going to be enough to cut for one block, and you're going to stitch that block together. When you're working on the left leaning blocks, you can see now on the right there how my block looks like it's tilted to the left. You're going to stack 2 of the same coordinating fabric, whichever one you want for this particular block, whichever fabric, because remember you have 3 different fabrics that are going to make this up. You're going to stack 2 of the accent fabric right side up, and then 2 of the fabric that you pick. And then this time the accent blocks get cut from the lower left corner to the upper right corner. And then that will yield you a mirrored version of the block we just cut. So now with stitching, we're going to attach a 1/4 inch foot to our sewing machine. And you can do this application with any machine that allows for a straight stitch and a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you're going to align the pieces like I have over here on the diagram. And I'm using my 97D foot on my Bernina 880 Plus. And the only thing here to keep in mind is you are going to have a little tongue sticking out here. That needs to be about a 1/4 inch where this intersection comes in from the edge of your fabric like that. And I mean, you can use a ruler, whatever, you can use the side of your foot when we get this over to the machine. But then when we get to the end, it also needs to be about a 1/4 inch from the edge. So let's go over to the machine and see how to do this. So at the machine, I'm still kind of leaving this little lap over there about a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to lower my presser foot and I'm going to put my needle down. There we go. And that's going to kind of hold things in place while I zhuzh this. And now this fabric is lined right up with the edge of my presser foot, and I'm just going to stitch. And I take it slowly, and you don't want to stretch. We are working with a little bit of bias here. And now as we get to the end, we also are going to anticipate that we are a 1/4 inch in there at the edge. See that little tongue? I'm calling it a tongue. You can call it whatever you want. And you can see there what that looks like at the beginning and the end. And now we're going to press the seam open. Once you've pieced your pieces and sewn them, pressing your seam allowance open, when you have 4 pieces that are identical, you have a set. Then you're going to have a little partner set, and you're going to sew those together. And you see the difference here? With this one, I've got the angle going up this way, whereas on this one, the angle goes this way. So this is going to create a mirrored set. And you're going to have some extra strips that you're not going to use after this, but that's going to give you some freedom to really play around with the layout. So we're going to sew all of our half rectangle pieces, and then we're going to lay them out in our quilt with our cute embroideries. So now that we have our layout down, let's talk about sewing our half triangles to our block. So I want you to notice that the wide part of the block is going to butt up against your embroidered piece. So if I pull this new block out, and now here you can see there's one of our blocks. See the wide piece there? That is going to go against, flush with the edge there on the left side. So you always want to make sure that you're lining up the wider part of the border fabric. With that in mind, as you can see here in my diagrams, there's that wider part there lined up on the right side in this application, because remember, we have mirrored versions of the blocks. We want to start sewing about 1 inch in from our embroidered piece. So if we look in this application, I've aligned my wide part up with the right so that it's flush. The dotted line represents my 1/4 inch. So I'm going to stitch 1/2 inch in and stitch from that point to that point. Then when I add my next piece, I'm going to press to the half square triangle, and it's going to look like this with one long piece hanging out here like that. Then we're going to align our piece even with the side here, stitch and press to the half rectangle. And then you just keep that, you do that process 2 more times. Then you come back and you fill in this area here where you started stitching so that you can stitch that little flap that hangs out onto the half rectangle. And then, like I mentioned earlier on, your half rectangle pieces may not align with your trimmed embroidered blocks. So all you're going to do is just trim these up at the end, and nobody's going to be the wiser. It's more important in this case to be consistent than it is to aspire for some specific measurement. So I used the seam line between my half rectangle pieces and the embroidered block as a guide. So when I squared up, I was about 3 1/4 inches away from that seam line. So that's how I trimmed my little extra pieces off my blocks. Once you have all of your blocks ready and you know your layout by using our layout pattern that I provided in the handout, it's time to sew your blocks together. And you want to pay special attention to the little intersections where the points meet. Now, one of the reasons why I was totally fine with chopping off the points is that when these go together, they're going to give you not a defined point, which helps the eye kind of look at this and not be like, hey, you didn't line this up correctly. So you're just going to pin at those bulky intersections, and then you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam and just stitch down that seam, and you're going to join your blocks according to the diagram you set off for yourself when you planned your blocks. And then just make sure that you encourage your little pieces to lay flat as you stitch them. And then you're going to sew all the blocks together in a row, and then get ready to sew your rows together. And look at that little intersection. I mean, it looks great. So once all of your rows are complete, you're going to sew your rows together, making sure that you have everything tilted and angled at the same place as your diagram. Then you're going to match the seams and sew those pieces together. And then you'll have a quilt top that resembles this. And then it's time to add some borders. To add your first border, you want to measure your quilt. And I would recommend that you measure the length first, and you go right down the middle like these blue arrows indicate, and you're going to record that measurement. Then you're going to cut 6 strips the width of the fabric. That's 2.5 inches wide, and I use the purple floral. You're going to stitch these strips together like you would for making a binding, and then you're going to subcut 2 pieces this measurement that you recorded here so that you sew a border on each side of your quilt top. And then you're going to press to the border, and then you're going to measure the width and record that measurement. And then you're going to subcut 2 other pieces, that measurement after your border has been added. And then you'll have your first frame. And then you're going to repeat that process again for your second border, except I have a little tip if you're using a special print fabric. So basically what I did is I fussy cut my strips of this beehive fabric, and when I had to join them together, I was like, ugh, I want to make sure I align my print. So this is how I do it. I take the piece I want to join it to, find a beehive, and press like down the center of the beehive. Then I just put it on the other piece, lining up everything to the best I can. Then I unfold with my little finger crease there, and then I'm going to put a pin to hold it into position. And that's it. And then make sure it doesn't wiggle around, take it over to my sewing machine and stitch right in that crease. Don't sew over the pins, guys.
All right, do you think you'd want to make a super cute quilt like this? I think you might. And you know, we have another video that we're doing where I'm going to show you how to morph, place markers, and do some fun stuff to do these little wishbone patterns on our Q-matic. And as a bonus, I'm going to show you how you can do that on your 790 Pro as well. So don't forget to check out that video. But in the meantime, you can check out other videos and tutorials that we do on our YouTube channel. It's pretty easy to get there. It's just youtube.com/BERNINA of Naperville. And there you can like, comment, and subscribe. Happy quilting.